Welcome to Vermont Artists and Authors, where we interview great storytellers and artists from the amazing Green Mountain State. This is episode 41. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed and highly talented teacher, children's book author, painter, photographer, and toy designer, Bryan Ballinger.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good.
You have like an extensive array of all kinds of artwork that you've done. And when we first started connecting again, you were in the midst of doing murals.
Yes.
And then been following you on Facebook, and you've also then around COVID times you started diving into doing 3D animation sculpture with basically you're making toys now, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I'm like, I get into something and then I go all in on it. And then I go all in and go on, and then I find something else. But then I still kind of do the same stuff that I was in, but now I got something else. And I'm just...
You worked for VeggieTales. You were an animator at VeggieTales. And now you've been, for the last 15 years, you've also now been a professor.
So I helped start the animation program at Huntington University. I taught there full time for like 17 years, something like that. And then I backed off now so that I still teach one class, but then I'm doing all my other stuff.
You spend a lot of time also doing children's book illustrations. You came out with 3 of your own children's books, Animal Gas, Kooky Cookery.
Kooky Cookery was that one. Actually, that was an odd, strange cookbook dedicated to, the types of foods that were really popular in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And some of the 70s.
But then you did one that way before even that. Like we talked about back in 2002, you came out with one called The Great Cheese
Squeeze. Yeah, I did that with my really good friend Keith Lango.
But now you're back to it. So it's been about 10 years in the making. You're now actually working on a brand new children's book.
Yeah, it's finished. It's coming out. The publisher has all the final files. It's coming out in May. The Big Wig Parade. I'm a huge fan of just everything that wigs represent.
Really?
Well, sure. I mean, they're just, Okay, so here's the squirrel.
Okay.
Yeah, and the squirrel has like a kind of a Marie Antoinette kind of a thing going on.
Like a bouffant, is that what it's called?
Yeah. So I'm hoping that the publisher goes for making, full-on toy versions to go with the books. But I just couldn't, once I get characters going, now that I'm doing the toys, I just got to make them.
So talk to us a little bit about what you meant about like what do wigs represent and how does that interact with putting it inside a children's book?
Yeah, I don't know. Wigs are just like they sit on your head. They change who you are, kind of, but and they can get, and the history of them has been so ridiculous that they're just, I don't know, they're just lovable. Come on, who doesn't love a good wig?
Who doesn't love a good wig?
Yeah.
So so how did that fit in? Like, what was the inspiration behind? Were you inspired to do this during your experiment of making these toys, or is this something that kind of happened in tandem?
Yeah, it was. I had started on it kind of actually before the toys, and then I went into the toys, and then I then decided to finish it and gave it to my literary rep, and then it sold right while I was doing the toys too. So
your last, as we said before, like the last book you came out was Animal Gas in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see yourself going back to a children's books? Because since then you were, as we said, you're doing murals, you've been doing photography, you've been doing 3D sculpture, 3D animation, you do an animation class. Did you see yourself going back to children's books at one point?
Yeah. I still I have this whole list of things that you want to work on, ideas that you just write down. So I've got like 7 or 8 other picture book ideas that I want to do. I definitely want to keep doing them, but then I have lots of other stuff that I'm doing too. We haven't brought it up yet, but the Faulty Dogs, which is a toy line that I'm currently working on, I want to do a picture book that goes with that too. But that started with the toys.
Okay. So, basically, in 2022, you've been really just going really into the 3D sculpture and making them into toys. You've been playing with different levels of, what do you call it? Because sometimes some of them are resin, some of them are.
Yeah, they're all resin, but I make them
Okay.
look like they're not resin sometimes. For some reason, I'd love to draw dogs, so I have like a massive folder of thousands of dog doodle drawings. You can see some of them there. And it's fun to just translate them into 3D because my style is really 2D. I mean, if you look at my drawings, there's no dimension. I mean, they're it's flat. My brain is a 2D brain. It's just kind of funny. But then to translate them into 3D is a challenge, but it's really fun. And then to take that and then make it at something physical I can hold, and then to paint it and make them look like they're out of different materials is just a lot of fun. So, and I'm working with a toy company in New York called Tenacious Toys.
Give us a little bit of education on how would you take your character and turn it into a 3D model?
Okay, so yeah, I've used 3D computer software since 89. So I've been using it a lot. So there's a lot of different software you can use, but the one that I use the most now is called Nomad, and it's actually on the iPad, and it's awesome. So I just take one of my drawings like this, and then I bring it into Nomad, and then Nomad is a sculpting program. So it's really like working with clay. So I'll model it in Nomad, and just out of these primitive shapes, you stick them together, you blend them together, and then you can like sculpt with different tools like you would with clay. So I build the model in there, and then I can actually bring that model into Procreate on the iPad and paint a version of it. So like what you have up now, on one side, you've got this rendering where I've painted that in Procreate, and then I just render it out. So then I have a version that I know what it's going to look like in full color. Then I take the 3D model, and then you can see on the right, on the other side, there's the 3D model that I'm holding, and I can use the Procreate 3D model, painted model version as reference once I've printed it out. So then I take the model and I bring it into what's called slicing software, which basically converts it to a format that a 3D printer can then print out. Then I 3D print it, and then I have to sand a little bit of it, but not too much, and then I prime it, and then I just hand paint them. I can send the 3D model to the toy factory, but then I can also send my painted model that they can then base, the colors on. So it's like a prototype for them.
Right. So using the word toy, would that be technically a misnomer? Because are they more like figurines or sculptures? What would be the definition
term
between them?
that is currently art toy is kind of what they're called, or designer toy.
Would you go as far as like with some of your dog designs? Would you actually make them into what are they called when they have
articulated parts? Yeah.
Articulated?
Yeah, I do want to start doing that too. And you can 3D print the parts with the joints and everything in them so that they can articulate. Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Yep.
And so because you have such a wide array, we're just talking about the Faulty Dogs. And for those that are interested, please check these out. That Bryan has these at breadwig.com. And there's a link right there in the Faulty Dogs toy section. And do all these actually have like personalities, names, and all that information, or are they just dogs?
They have names, and they have some personality that's in my head, that I'm gonna definitely be fleshing all that out for the books. But like there's some that are more doofy and playful, and then there's other ones that are kind of frumpy and grumpy, and There's ones, some of them are a little stranger than others. Part of the fun of this is pushing the envelope on what is actually what could be a dog. I mean, you look at that yellow one there, and it's like that's pushing the envelope pretty far. but there's always further you can push it. So
right. So when you say that, you're pushing the envelope of that from a design perspective, because as we said earlier, you are an art professor. You actually teach color theory. You actually teach all this stuff. At what point do you say, from a design perspective, what are the minimal requirements that you put in this to say this is a dog?
Boy, gotta have a nose and some kind of a snout, but boy, there's some dogs that don't really have much of a snout, so they're pretty flat faced. So a nose is a good thing. Ears, the ears can flop up. Now the one there on the right, I call that the squirrel dog, the silver one, because that's starting to go into squirrel territory. I mean, you look at all these, you can tell they're dogs, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the most bizarre part. They separate of there, they're like, there's nothing in common with them. But when you look at them individually, you know that's a dog. They're all so bizarrely different. It's amazing.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's the nose, floppy ears, although they don't all have floppy ears, but that helps. I would say, some sort of a muzzle.
Right.
Maybe that's it. 4 legs and a muzzle.
Yeah, because some of the ears are floppy, some of them aren't. Yeah. So how much of this, when you're actually building these things, that you were experimenting with color and texture? Well, the texture is the same, but having the feeling like some of them seem to look like they're made out of pewter, or some of them seem like they're made out of clay.
That's just this whole 3D printing and this whole process of making these plays into my inner mad scientist, where you want to try something and then see what happens and see what it looks like. So I like to print them out, and then because you can make more than one copy, then I can say, okay, I'm going to just see what happens if I slap this on here, or try this new kind of paint, or put this paint over this paint, or try this rub and buff stuff on the top, or and I just like to experiment and see what you can make it look like. Basically make it look like it's not made out of resin.
So with the process itself, what's the recyclable aspects of this? Say, for instance, you make a dog, you make a dog. It's like, I don't like that. Is that something that you can like remelt the resin, or how does that work?
You really, with the resin stuff, you can't.
Okay.
There's another type of 3D printer that melts plastic, and sometimes you can remelt. It's kind of a pain, but you can sort of recycle that. So I try not to have any that are. I've gotten pretty good at it to where like I don't get many failures where I'm just have to throw it out.
Right.
And even when I do get some failures, sometimes I'll Frankenstein them together. Or I'll have ones that are a little bit, I don't know, they're not right or something, and I'll still paint them up. And then sometimes I like to just leave ones, like leave them around for people to find. I'm like, okay, so here's the squirrel dog, and I've painted him kind of this silver and blue.
Right.
But then I've got this one where it's straight black and white. And then I've got this one where he's got more of a blue patina kind of a thing going on. And then I got the silver one, and with kind of these blue metallic underneath. Right. And then print them in different sizes. So I'll print these little ones, and then like these little ones are fun to kind of leave around town just to see who finds them. Free art.
And also when you're talking earlier about how important color and design is, like you're just showing us, as an example, how much color really helps with the design
Oh yeah.
of a piece of art.
Oh yeah.
It feels completely different. You know, putting aside the fact that you've been a professional illustrator for 20 odd years, how has doing 3D sculptures improved your art style on a 2D in a 2D fashion?
You know what's interesting is I actually will use it to help me with my 2D stuff. So
Oh,
um
cool.
I will like when I'm if I'm doing a book or I'm doing a character that I'm going to draw a lot, I'll model it up in 3D and then I got a reference. And I can
Okay.
print them out and have it right there, or I can just rotate it, on the computer in 3D. And it helps me think about it because yeah, you see my drawings. They both eyes are on the one side of the head, and it's
Right.
very flat and in 2D. But that has really actually helped me a lot in figuring out okay, what that look like from another angle or from a different side or whatever. So yeah, yeah.
So is there some level of reverse engineering that you do now with 2D to 3D? Do you see itself easier to design, as you said, a character in 3D than make it 2D, or reverse engineer what you've done with your faulty dogs by taking an existing image of a dog and then trying to make it into 3D?
It I find for me the creative beginning of the character is always 2D and drawn,
Okay.
always. But if I'm gonna then do more with it, then going to 3D helps a lot.
Because you mentioned that, I'm also thinking about when you came out with Animal Gas, and then you came out with the Great Cheese Squeeze 20 years ago. Have you ever thought about, like, these are really fun characters? I might just make this into like a sequel to these stories.
Yeah, I have thought about that. In fact, I have a sequel that I wrote with for the Great Cheese Squeeze that I haven't gotten around to making it into a full book dummy to pitch. The
Right.
story's written for it though, and I do have a sequel in mind for Animal Gas called A Farty Party that I want to do. um, yeah, and I'm hoping that the Big Wig Parade will have sequel potential as well.
It seems as though that, looking at your murals and looking at your previous books, that you do have some repeat characters that.
I'll sit down to draw, and if I don't know what I'm doing, then I have these stock things that I just start drawing, and they're usually characters.
It's like like the pig with the banjo, right?
Yeah, oh, don't get me started on banjo pigs. Yeah, you should check out. There's a website dedicated to banjo pig drawings that got me started on that. They just go together, right?
They do. They
Yeah.
do.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Just yeah, pigs and banjo, same thing as, like, I don't know. It just seems like, and then like crows and, I don't know, violins. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yep.
Now I'm just thinking of, like, stringed instruments with, like, random farm animals. Now I'm gonna be on that for a while.
Did you see that?
Because
I have that the one mural where they're all yeah, the farmyard hoedown.
right. And was that, and so talk to us a little bit about that perspective of how complicated. I've seen some of your videos. So anybody's also interested, if you go to breadwig.com, there's also a link to Bryan's YouTube page, and there are some really good videos, a couple minutes long, of you doing some of your murals. So how
Yeah.
did you get started on mural painting?
Uh so there's a small city near here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they put out a call for muralists several years ago, and I was like, man, that would be fun. So I just applied, and um because I'm good with the computer graphics stuff. I mocked up a whole bunch of designs on the actual walls, that they were going to be on, and put
Right.
together a really nice presentation for it. So I got that, and yeah, once you get one big mural under your belt, it shows that you can do it, and then it's a lot easier to get more. So yeah, I just did that one, and then super fun. Yeah, those ones there up at the top, or that's one of my more recent ones. It was a 360 mural in a library down near Indianapolis.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And that was so fun. So I did again, animals playing instruments. There are animals from all around the world playing instruments from their native region, and then I worked the names of the animals and the instruments and where they're from into the background of the mural. So that was
beautiful.
interesting to do as a 360 all the way around job.
Right. How complicated is it doing a mural? It's more like you have to. Do you utilize like a projector, or how did that work?
Yeah, I totally go for the projector. And then another thing that makes it a lot easier or more feasible is I use software on an iPad that unwarps it. So like, a great example is I did a mural on a 5-story parking garage. And when you project that high up, it's going to, warp. So this software unwarps it so it's straight on once it hits. And so then I just break it into pieces. You never envision yourself as, that you're this cartoonist, and then you have to go and learn how to work a giant bucket lift and 5 stories up and the wind's blowing around and stuff. But
you mentioned in a previous interview is like doing murals is almost a cross between a solitary work because you're painting this, but it's almost a sense of like there's a level of theater that happens.
It is. It's a little bit of performance art too.
Right.
And that's part of why I love it, because I'm used to like sitting in here working on stuff myself inside, and this is the opposite, where I'm outside, the weather's hitting me, I'm using my whole body to make this, moving around, I'm getting paint all over me, and there's people walking by and watching, asking questions, they'll come back later. And I actually like that part of it. It's a lot of fun to interact with people, and and they're really curious. In fact, that the one mural that I did with the animals at the hoedown with the banjo pig, I was working on that one, and I was working into the night, and it was in a small town, and the whole a whole bunch of people came and brought chairs and just sat there, and they made an evening of it. Just watching me and talking and listening to music, and there I am painting. It was really fun. So.
And what about the actual upkeep of this? Is there something like in a contract, like I like saying like you need to show up 2 years later and do a touch up or anything like that, or is there like you give them an instruction manual to say make sure you put this on it to keep it from
well, I seal them all with a really good sealer, and then I also give the option in the contract, if they want to pay for it, I'll put anti-graffiti coating on it too.
Okay.
And then after that, I just put it in there that in the contract that if at some point they need it to be touched up, they can contact me and hire me to touch it up. Unless it's the fault of, unless there's something that I did wrong that is making it not work. But it's almost, so far I haven't had to do that with any of my murals. They've held up really well. And usually the biggest thing to worry about is if the building is, if you're painting on like crumbling brick and stuff, in which case I make note of that before I start. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you're getting a little iffy in these areas. So, but,
and so this is almost like levels of like engineering is involved in this.
Yep. Yep. And planning it out and cutting it apart, the parts. So when you project it, you can get them all to line up, and then, figuring out how you're going to do it. Because I'm heavy on line work, I put all the colors in first. Because because you don't want to paint into the line work. That's, there's a reason,
Right.
the Disney did all the painting underneath the line work for their movies and stuff. So yeah, the downside to that is while you're painting it doesn't, without the line work, it doesn't look right. And so I'm always telling people, don't judge it yet. It's gonna look, don't, just wait. And then once I get the line work in, everybody's like, oh, okay. Now I see.
And this is proof positive for those that are looking to do murals and just do art, is just to remind people about the STEM aspects of art. There's a lot of math involved. So those that think I just want to draw pictures all day, I don't need to pay attention in math class. There's a substantial amount of math involved in doing this.
Yeah. I mean, I have on my computer, I have the shortcut to the calculator. Yep. Yeah, I know. And I have a whole, funny you should bring this up with the murals. I have a whole spreadsheet and way of calculating exactly how much paint in each color that I'm going to need. I use Photoshop. I do the design, and then I find out what the square footage is. And then in Photoshop, I can select the pixel areas of the color and figure out what percentage of the overall pixels in the image that is, and then convert that to what the square feet that I'll need and how much paint it covers, a square foot. And yeah, so that way, otherwise, you don't know how much paint you're going to get. You don't want to spend too much and get too much that you don't need, or not have enough. That's even worse. So,
right. You've gone through a completely different section of like where you were like 5 years ago. I mean, you were, have you been able to talk to like with your classmate, with your students? Have you been able to talk to your students about murals now? Is that something that you?
Yeah, in fact, I've managed to hire a couple of them as assistants. So,
wow, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I try and, I don't know, whatever I'm excited about somehow finds its way into my classes. So, but I think that's, if your professor is excited about what they're talking about, I think it makes a difference. So,
right.
Yep.
All right. So you mentioned it before. You have your books. Your Wigs book is Wigs on Parade. Is that what it's?
The Big Wig Parade.
We'll put a link to that book in the show notes for people can pre-order it then. Awesome. So, Brian, this has been a great time. Listen, come back on when you got another project popping up. This is great.
Oh, heck yeah. Well, I have no shortage of those.
It's true.
I have started the Faulty Frogs series, so.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Brian. It was a great talking to you.
Yeah, anytime. I love this. This is a lot of fun.